My neighbor really chose a great time to mow the lawn. Hopefully you guys can't hear that, but it's going to drive me crazy until they are done. All right, looks like we've got a good crowd here. Let's kick off our stand-up. What did we learn yesterday? Did props and components as props. Yeah, so not exactly components as props. You actually can pass an entire component via a prop, but we haven't gotten that fancy yet, and that is normally not something we don't normally pass an entire component in a prop. What we did pass was two pieces of the state. We passed not only the state, but with the ability to change the state. And so one thing that we ran into yesterday is whenever we set state, it's going to overwrite the state with whatever we're putting into it. So the problem that we ran into is the message input wanted to add just a single message, but in order to add a single message, it had to set the state. Well, it didn't have access to all the existing messages, so we had to not only pass down in via a prop the set messages, we also had to pass down the messages themselves. So when we did update the messages, it had access to the existing messages as well. And we did all of that right at the end of the class around message input. Does anyone have questions about that? Because I did get a couple questions from students. Okay, then I will keep going. So we combined code from a couple different places. We pulled in our Bootstrap. We used our existing module 4 code. Hopefully you guys got a good refactor sense of what it's like to take existing code and learning to borrow code that you've already written and pull that into another project. Kyle, yep, definitely great experience refactoring, going from JavaScript code to React. There is a huge job demand for that right now because a lot of employers are realizing, hey, we've got this old code and React is the new way to do it. React is more API friendly. It's more internet friendly. It creates cleaner code. Browsers are a lot faster. We're moving away from this notion of just having websites and moving into this notion of having web apps. So hopefully you can see how React is helpful in a messaging app, right? Because you could say, yes, what we created was a website, but we're adding some functionality on top of that. And because that content is dynamic, that now pushes it from just a static website into a dynamic web app. And so that's when React becomes super helpful. React web apps, little refactoring experience, all good. Did anyone get a chance to compare their module 4 vanilla JavaScript code to their React code? What are some things that you liked about the way we did it in React? And then what are some things that you liked that we did it in vanilla JavaScript and you didn't quite like the way React was doing it, or you didn't quite understand how React was doing it? This is one of those questions that it may be easier to unmute to answer than it is to type it in the chat, just because it will be probably a longer answer. And by the way, that is also something that I do professionally all day. I was literally just shipping a feature right before this call, which is a terrible idea because if I broke production, I would be pulling my hair out right now. But it was one of those things where I said, I don't have the time to write up all this documentation. Can you jump on a quick call with me? Because I knew just one user was going to be using it. And I explained it to her and screen shared. And it was just one of those things where it was just 10 times easier to show it than it was to write it all out. So I think this is one of those cases. Anything at all that you noticed that you liked about React that you didn't like in the JavaScript, in the vanilla JavaScript, or vice versa?
I don't know about liking or not liking, but I noticed it was easier in JavaScript to basically state is replacing messages.push, and that was quicker because you just push the messages in. You don't have to worry about like passing it the old messages and using the spread operator and everything like that. But I think it's probably easier to find where things are coming from in React, like just scrolling up and down the code and looking for things versus there are clues in React as to where it's coming from, whether it's coming from props and what other files to look in based on, like the names of things in the props and stuff like that.
Yeah, so reusable components, definitely a huge win in React, right? So when we had our update HTML, if you noticed, our update HTML was getting to be like 40 or 50 lines in the vanilla JavaScript. And it was like, whoa, we are doing a lot of logic in here to figure out, if it's a sent message or not a sent message. And now we've got a bunch of our HTML in our JavaScript, and using vanilla JavaScript, that gets really messy, right? But in React, we're able to go, oh, okay, well, we can use kind of ternary operators or little if statements and then put them in separate components. So now if I'm a front end only developer and I need to go update the, sent messages, I know exactly where to go to update that, and I can change the HTML and don't have to worry about breaking the whole app. With JavaScript, it would be a lot easier to, put some invalid HTML in or really screw up different aspects of the functionality of the app just by trying to change the styling in the JavaScript. Other things that we saw in vanilla JavaScript or in React, kind of differences between the two, good or bad?
Hey, Max, this is Shaw. One thing I noticed was using callback functions and also method.random, and also we use set timeout in JavaScript, but we didn't do that with React. Also, like a lot of push, message.push we had with JavaScript, but not in React. So also the usability, like you said.
Yeah, Shaw, that's a great point. I'm going to do an example of changing our front end to use .push instead of the spread operator, just so everyone can really understand what that spread operator is doing and where the messages are coming from. So I will do a quick example of that, just adding console logs and showing you a couple of different ways of doing it. With that said, if there is time, I would love to go back and add in like the math.random functionality and the users typing and all of that kind of stuff. That we forgoed. The other thing that we skipped over was the edit and delete buttons. Hopefully we will have time to get to them today and talk about integrating it at the server and how we do it at that level. But yes, those are definitely things that we had working in the JavaScript that we didn't have, we didn't port over to React. That's not to say we can't do it in React, definitely can do it in React. We just didn't have the time to port those features over. Anything else that people noticed? Okay, so I am gonna kind of zigzag around here for the first 15 minutes of class. What the objective is today is to create our endpoints and integrate the endpoints in with the front end. Now, you may be saying, why do we need to do that? Well, we need to get the messages data from our front end, the messages we are sending, up to the server, because it's going to be the server's job to hold on to those messages and be able to access those messages in a web server so other people can also tie in and see those messages as well. So if all goes well, by the end of class, we will actually be able to have a server up and running where we can all see each other's messages that are being sent. But to start, we're going to get everything working locally on our computer, and hopefully we'll kind of use the sending each other messages as like our end of the week celebration send off kind of thing. But with that said, I am going to do a quick example of how we could use messages.push, and just to make sure to recover why we need both messages and set messages getting passed down as props into the input, because it is one of those things where you would go, why does the component responsible for sending messages care about what the other messages even are? So I want to cover that. But before I do, we are going to switch after that over to the back end. And there are two different ways we can cover this. We can either say, let's plan in advance and cover all the different endpoints. Let's code out all the different endpoints and then go back to our front end and add in all those endpoints. Or we can kind of take a more integrated approach of, all right, well, we need the ability to send messages. So let's go create that endpoint and build it into our React app. Okay, now we need the ability to read the messages that are up there. So let's go build out that endpoint and then go integrate it. I tend to work professionally and personally as the step-by-step. Let's create the thing in the front end. Let's go create the endpoint. Let's go make it work in the front end. And then let's go figure out what the next endpoint is and go create that. However, it is totally an option to say, all right, let's bang through all the back-end endpoints, go integrate it in the front end, and then if we need to tweak it later, we can. So I am encouraging the second approach, which is build the endpoints as we need them. But I am going to give you guys all the option to pick which one you would prefer. And if you don't have a preference, you do not have to vote.
I have a question about yesterday's code, actually, while people are voting. Are you also getting the warning message about each child on the list should have a unique key prop? And are we going to fix that today, or?
Yes, I was a bad React developer not adding in a key. We will fix that.
Cool.
All right, give everyone one more chance to vote. Okay, so the way I normally do it, one out, we are going to create the endpoints as we need them, which is totally fine, and nothing wrong with doing it the other way. But I think as you guys are learning, you know, having one thing at a time and testing it and making sure it's working before you go back is a good approach. I can share a little bit of Karen's experience. If Karen was working with a backend developer, and the backend developer would dump all of this documentation on her and go, here's how all the endpoints should work. And she would go wire them up in the front end and be like, I can't get this to work. I don't understand why this isn't working. And it turned out that because she didn't have access to the backend code, she had no way of knowing that it was broken on the back end and not on the front end. So one of the benefits of taking that approach of building out the back end while you're integrating it in your front end is that you get to actually test it and figure out, oh, the back end just isn't sending this data, or, oh, we want to figure out if this issue is on the front end code or the back end code before we go too far. So we're going to back burner that for just 1 second. I want to fix my key warning, and I also want to fix I also want to go through the messages and show how we can push that as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop open my chat front end code. and I am going to head to my terminal and run a npm start. And wait for my front end to pop open to make sure that I'm actually in the right code. Oops. I have a server apparently still running from work. Give me 1 second. I used port 3000 at work, and apparently I left a server running, which I didn't think I did. So what I'm actually going to do is share my screen and show you. We use Node at work, and you can see I've got 3 processes of Node running here. So I am, to get to this, I hit Command Space and typed in Activity Monitor, and that popped open a window that looked like this. You don't have to follow along or do any of this. This is just showing you what happens if you've got a rogue server running that you can't find in terminal. So I'm going to find Node, and I'm just going to quit out of all 3 of those processes. So if I now run my npm start, hopefully, nope, it's still in use. Okay, now they're all gone. Please, please, please start. Success. Okay, so that was just a server that I still had running from work. I had closed out of all my terminal windows, but that apparently did not kill out the server. So I just went into Activity Monitor, did a search for Node up here in the top, and then clicked on them and hit close. And what that's doing is closing out the process. You can think of a process as like an app or a server running in the background. So because I had closed out my terminal, there was no way to tell it like, hey, go shut down. So Activity Monitor can be really helpful in finding things running behind the scenes and telling them to close. Okay, so I have my front end up and running, and we haven't touched the back end yet. And I think we've ported over all the code from module 4 that we need. So that's the only code that I have open right now. So I'm going to go over to my front end code, and we're going to talk a little bit about our messages. So on our, let's actually fix our key first. So if you notice in the console in the browser, we have a couple things that we should probably clean up. One of them is a big red warning. Warnings are normally yellow, but when it is red, you know it's something that you probably should fix before it goes out to production. And what it's saying here is it's saying each child should have a unique key property. And where it's telling me, if we look at this stack trace going on, it's telling me that it is in sent message. Sent message is used in messages list, which is in a div, which is in the app. And so this is, again, a good example of an error message, not only telling us what's wrong, but telling us where we can go fix it. So I'm going to go back to my VS Code. I'm going to pop open my messages list. And down here, I've got my sent message and my received message. But if we come up here, we're using those in a map. And because we are iterating over it again and again, React is saying, hey, I would really like a key. So if any of this data gets updated, I can easily go find that data again and just update that tiny little portion that changed, as opposed to having to re-render all of the HTML. And in order for that React magic to happen for us, we have to put a key on anything that we're iterating over or looping. And so when we're working with an array, normally every object in the array, if it's coming from a database, would have an ID on it. And we could use that ID as the key. But because we haven't quite gotten into databases, coming up on Monday, we need to use something else as the ID. So we could use the message itself, but the problem that we run into there is if we send 2 of the same messages, the key is no longer unique. And so we can't really use that because we're not allowed to have 2 of the same key. We are going to use the index in this case, because we don't really have any other unique ID to use, it is generally discouraged to use the index as a key. And the reasoning behind that is if you move the array around, React now needs to go re-render the entire array instead of just the one or two things that you have moved. But because we don't have an ID, we are going to use the index in this case. So map always gives us whatever we are iterating over, each object or each whatever is in the array. But map takes a second parameter as well if you need to use it, and we are going to call that index. And then in the index, because we now have access to the index, we're going to go to our received message, and we are going to add a key on that to use the index. And because we are returning possibly two different things here, we're not only returning received message, we're also returning sent message. So we need to add a key of index onto that as well. So if I pop back over to my React and I refresh, I now have no warnings coming up about not using key, because everything we're mapping over, everything we're iterating over, not only has a key, but the key is unique. Now, we also have some warnings down here that we should probably clean up. It is warning me that you're not supposed to use the A tag unless you add an href on it. And it's actually telling that for accessibility reasons and to make it keyboard accessible, we shouldn't really be using an A tag unless it also has an A href on it. So I'm going to go back to my code. And in my code, I am going to find where I am using that A href, which I believe is right here. And instead of using an A tag, I'm going to make that a span tag. Now, my styling may change a little bit, but that's okay. We can always go back and fix that down the road. So I'm going to make these span tags. Save that. Now you notice my terminal is clear and says compiled successfully and doesn't have any warnings. And if I pop back over and refresh here, I also have no warnings in my browser console as well. So that's good code tidying up, both adding the key and then also cleaning up any warnings that are in the console. We have a warning. We have warnings set up at work because we also use React. And the general rule of thumb is we don't push anything out to production while it still has warnings. So sometimes you want to just go write your code and you ignore all the warnings. But before you're ready to open up a merge request and actually get that code out into production, we do have a requirement that you clear out any warnings that are in your console and kind of clean up all of that code. Okay, so we did that. Now let's talk a little bit about our messages coming in here. So I am going to go to my code and pop back over to our message input. So our message input is getting two props, our set messages and our messages. So let's just, for a second, delete this prop. So we only are going to set the messages. And we are going to take out our messages prop, and we're going to say, hey, set the messages to this new message object. Okay, what's in that new message object? The text, where is text coming from? Text is coming from the state. Okay, how does the state get updated? Through set text. Okay, where does set text get updated? That happens in our onChange. Okay, where does that onChange event happen? That happens on our input that we're typing in the new text. Okay, great. So what we do is if I refresh the page, I have my messages here, and I'm just going to drag this down for a second. If I type in ABC and hit send, it's going to make a little liar out of me and not do what I expected it to do. I'm going to save my code, come back in, refresh. Now I have my messages. I'm going to come back in here. I'm going to say ABC, and all my messages disappear. Okay, well, why is that happening? Because messages is an array that already has messages in it. And so what we are doing whenever we use set messages, we're saying overwrite whatever's in messages now and add in and overwrite it with whatever I'm passing in. Okay, so if we say, but we don't want to overwrite it, we just want to add to it. Well, set messages is pretty rigid, right? We can't edit our set messages because set messages is coming back from use state. That is already defined. So what we need to do is we need to say, hey, we would like to add into our messages. And we did that with push before, but we can't push into a prop because props are what we call immutable. They are read only, right? We can't change the prop. And so what we do is we come up with this new array that is using the data that is coming in from the prop and making a new array out of it. So to make that a little explicit, we are going to say const existing messages is equal to our messages. Where is messages coming from? That is coming in from our prop. How do we know that's coming in from a prop? Because if we head over to our app.js, we say we are passing in both set messages and the messages themselves. And that is coming from our use state up at the top. Okay, so in my message input, I have my existing messages. I also have my const new messages, my new message, excuse me, one message. And that is going to be equal to this object. And that object, we're using that structure in the messages list and in the message component to pull information out of that object. So what we want our messages to be equal to is our const merged array is going to be equal to, and then a new array that has our existing messages and our new message. And so what this ... is saying is take everything that is inside that array and just dump it in right here. So existing messages with the ... is pulling out the 3 objects we already have in the existing messages and adding it into our new array. And then it is taking our new message and adding that in as the 4th object in that array. So to prove that, I'm going to console log my existing messages, my new message, and my merged array. And then finally, I'm going to set my merged array in here. So let's pop over here. We're going to refresh. I have my 3 messages that I have sent. I'm going to clear out my console, say ABC, and log. And now this is where we see we've got a lot of console logs still kind of in our code. And so it's getting easy to get lost in what's happening when. So I'm going to come back over here, and all I care about is the console log on line 15. So I'm going to go back over to my code, and I'm also have a console log on messages list 6. So I'm going to go to messages list and find my console log on 6 and take that out. Okay, fresh. Let's see if I got most of them. Message list 24 also has a console log. So I'm going to take that one out. And if I refresh and send my ABC, now I only have my 1 console log, and that is showing me the first thing we logged out was our existing messages, right? And we can see 1, 2, 3 and 1, 2, and 3 messages. We then log out our new message object, which has our text ABC in it. And then the final result is our merged array that has all 4 messages in it. Now you can say that's great, but I would like a way to still use push. Push makes sense to me. We just want to add it into the array. Well, we still need our existing messages, right? And the reason why we do that is we can't modify the prop directly. So let's actually just try to do that. What I'm going to do, I'm just going to comment all of this out. I'm going to say, all right, well, it should be as simple as taking our messages and pushing into it. And what are we going to push in? We're going to push in our new message. And I'm not sure if React is going to yell at us or not, but let's see what happens. So I come back over here, I refresh, everything's working. I type in ABC and I hit send, and it disappears. And it's like, well, what's happening? I come back over here. I console log out my messages. I refresh, I type in ABC and hit send. Well, it's there, but because we're breaking two rules actually. Props are supposed to be immutable, unchangeable, read only, right? All saying kind of the same thing. And whenever we update the state, we are never supposed to just update the variable in the state. We're supposed to use the set variable name method to update that in the state. And so what we do is, in order to fix that first rule, we make a copy of the prop coming in. And so we say, okay, let existing messages equal whatever the messages are coming in. And we still have our new message. So now we are going to copy our existing messages variable and push in whatever the new message is. So we just fixed the first rule that we broke of props are supposed to be read only. So we make a little copy of it. We still create our new message like normal, but now because we created that copy, we can easily push in the new message. But we have to then take that copy and use the proper method to take that copy and set it back into our state. And that's when we are going to use our set messages to our existing messages. And so I come over here, I refresh, I type in ABC, I hit send, and it doesn't work. Try that one more time. Still not working. Okay, so I'm going to console log out my existing messages and see what's happening here. And do my ABC and hit send. They are added to the array. I may have to be a little more explicit in how I make a copy to that. Okay. So even though this is what I had before, and React was basically saying, no, you're still pointing at that prop. That prop you're not supposed to change, right? And because you're changing it, we're not going to respond. We're not going to react when you add things into it. So what I said was, instead of just pointing existing messages at the messages prop coming in, I said, take everything that is in messages, which is the ... that spread operator, right? Take the entire array, each object in it, spread it out, and throw it in a new array for us. Okay, so if I save that, come back over, refresh, type in my message, now it's working, and I can keep adding my messages to it. So this is all a very explicit way of saying what we accomplished before, right? If you really wanted to use push, you could use this code. That would work completely fine. But the way we boiled all of this down is we said, well, we still want our set messages, and in line, we can set our messages to a new array, and that new array is going to take all the existing messages, dump them in this new array, which is what the ... is doing, and then dump in our new message object that we are sending, which looks like this. And it is going to have the text that we are pulling from our state here. So all I need to do is do a quick cleanup. Come over here, refresh, ABC, DEF, ABC, send, and it's clearing. Does anyone know why it's clearing? Why it's not holding on to my message? Same reason it was doing this in module 4, actually. It's reloading, but Mel, you got it. I accidentally deleted my event.prevent default up here at the top. So I'm going to save that. I'm going to pop over here. I'm going to refresh and do an ABC, and now that's holding, and I can send multiple messages, and it's good to go. All right, let me get reactions on that. Was that a helpful detour? Was that a distracting detour? How are we feeling about that code? Always multiple ways of doing things, and it's you've got to walk a fine line between overshowing or over explaining and then not understanding it on the flip side. So that the spread operator is a newer JavaScript syntax, super helpful in being able to say, just go grab everything in that array and dump it in for me. You're basically merging two arrays into each other. How are we feeling? Any questions on that before we continue? Okay. So what we are going to do is we are going to get our backend fired up, and then we're going to think through whatever our first endpoints are. Oh, Carolyn, I'm sure I could find something to share that you would not find helpful. And yes, Kyle, to your point, the way we did it last night was definitely simpler. But if you don't understand it, it doesn't matter how simple it is, right? And so if you get what the spread operator is doing, if you get your merging two arrays down, you can write that code, right? But if it makes more sense to you to use a push, there is nothing, no one's going to come after you and say, oh, can't believe you didn't use a spread operator there, right? Using push is a completely fine method. Okay, so to create my backend, I am going to file open, and I am going to make sure I am in the right folder. So I'm headed to my code folder, and I am in module 7, week 1, and I am going to create my chat-backend. And I'm made a mistake. I'm not actually going to hit open there. I want to file new window first. And now that I'm in my new window, because I want to keep my existing code open, now I'm going to file open and go find that folder that I just created, my chat backend. I'm going to pop open that folder, and I don't have any files over here yet. That's okay. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to open the integrated terminal, and I am going to npm init. And then I'm going to do a -y, which just stands for yes, like answer yes to all the questions that you're going to ask about what you want the name to be and all of that kind of stuff. Okay, now that I am in here, I need to npm i-s. I don't think there are very few times you ever want to npm I without the -s, because you want to, if you send your code to someone else, you want them to have the ability to install everything that you have also installed. Jahil, we cannot hear you. Okay, so I'm in my npm install, and I'm going to get fancy here. I'm going to install 3 things at once, just because I know we are going to need them. I'm going to install Express, but I can just hit a space and keep adding things on that I want to install. So I also want to install Body Parser, and I'm also going to need Quartz. So I'm going to run npm i-s, Express, Body Parser, and Quartz. I'm going to throw that in the chat because I can hear, just know someone is going to ask for it. So that is in Zoom. We'll also put it in Slack because I know someone's going to ask for it over there as well. Okay.
I missed it. Did you do anything else before you ran that? I think
Nope.
I missed something. No, because you already had a package JSON in there, and I don't think I do.
Oh, I ran npm init -y.
Oh, okay. Thanks.
Okay. So npm init -y, again, we want to make sure we understand at least the basic concept of what everything is doing. npm init -y is creating our package.json for us, right? And our package.json has the name of the project, the version, and a couple other things in it. But what it's really doing is setting us up for a place we can save in our dependencies. So if I want to ship my code to you, I'm not going to ship you, I'm not going to send you my node modules because that's like 200 meg. Instead, I would rather send you this package.json file along with my app.js and have you install the dependencies yourself. And so that's a common thing when you receive someone else's code or you check out someone's code, you are going to have to run npm I or npm install, which is going to use the package.json to go fill out your node modules folder, install all of your dependencies, and then you'll be able to actually run that code. Okay, so we had everything installed. We didn't have any errors. So I am now going to create my file. And to shake it up a little bit, I'm going to call it server.js. You can call this whatever you want. I have seen index, I've seen app, I have seen backend, I have seen all different kinds of things, but we're going to just use server tonight to hopefully make the different names a little bit more clear. Okay. Who remembers what the first line is that we, Latonia, I just saw your request. The only major thing that we changed was our messages list.js to add in the key. Everything else was just an example of different ways of doing it. So I will share message list in Slack. Okay. So let's go back to our backend code. Let's make this window maybe a little bit bigger, hopefully. Okay. What is the first thing we add into our server? Require express, you got it. So we need to const express to have a place to pull express into, and then we are going to require our express. Okay, now we've got this framework express. We want to use express to create an app or a server. So to keep the naming consistent, I called this server. So instead of using app.everything like we used 2 nights ago, I'm going to use server.get or server.listen or anything like that. So I'm going to say const server. And where am I pulling my server from? I'm pulling it from Express. And hopefully you guys are seeing, okay, server comes from Express, Express comes from this const comes from the require, right? So you're just backtracing through there. Okay, now to make sure my server is listening, I'm going to create a route. So I'm going to say server.get, and I'm going to just do a slash there because I just want it to be with nothing after the slash work at the home page. And then I always have my request and my response that Express is so generously providing for us. And I am going to send back on the response, hello world. Okay, have that there. I want to fire up my server. What am I going to run in my terminal to fire up my server? I am not actually going to use npm start because that's for React. So React has so generously provided us a lovely npm start script. And we can actually see, this may be TMI for you guys, but if I go to my React code and look in my package.json, we can look in the scripts and see that the start command is actually running this command called React scripts start. And so I could copy that and paste it in my terminal, and it would do the same exact thing that my npm start is doing. So this script section is kind of like aliases or shortcuts that you can tell npm how to start, how to build, how to test, and it's actually only going to go run those commands for us. So the reason why we can't do that in our backend is if I look at my package.json, the only scripts that we have is test. And so if I run npm start in my backend, it's going to tell me kind of surprised that that worked. I thought it was going to tell me that it didn't know what npm start was because there wasn't an npm start in the package.json. But either way, we're gonna pretend like that didn't happen. Carolyn, Shaw, you're all on the right track. Instead of just running node server.js because we want it to auto reboot for us on any changes, we are going to npx nodemon and then run our server.js. And it's telling me I need to install nodemon because I'm in a different project I started over. So I'm just going to hit yes there and let npx do some magic for me. Okay, so starting node server.js. So we're good to go there. So I'm going to pop over to my browser and I'm going to go to localhost 3001 and I get site cannot be reached. Okay. My server isn't responding to my request. What did I do wrong? What else do I have to do?
Tell it what port to listen on.
Yes. So I just have to say server.listen, and I'm going to pick 3001 here because React defaults to 3000. You can change what port React starts up on, but it's easier to change the port the server starts on than it is to tell React what server to start on. Not much harder, but a little bit harder. So we're going to just change it here. And then we are going to add our callback in here that says console.log server listening on port 3001. And that serves two purposes. If anything breaks in my code up here, it's not going to tell me my server is working. And so we know it's broken. The other thing that we can do is sometimes you're going to have code shipped to you or you're going to start up a server. And you don't want to dig through all the code to figure out where the port is. So this is a nice way of just whenever you start up your server, let them know where your server is running. Listening or running, same thing. Listening means it is listening for a request coming in on port 3000. Running, kind of the same idea. Listening may be a little bit more descriptive, which is why I say listening, but same thing. We're running the server. We're listening on a certain port. Same concept.
I just put that in there. I meant like, did we add in the listening? That's why I said that.
We added in the listen. Yes.
Yes. Thank you. I wasn't saying like, are we listening or running? I was just saying like, did we add the coding?
Gotcha. Okay, so if I save that, I see my server listening on port 3001 down in my terminal. If I come back over here and refresh, I have my tiny hello world. Okay, break time. Well, not 7 o'clock break time. Okay, break time to make sure you guys are following along. So I will kick off a poll and make sure everyone has their server up and running. I will copy and paste this code into Slack. And the goal here is to make sure that you are getting your hello world in the browser. And while this seems super simple and it's just a couple lines of code, it's important to also acknowledge this is only the second server you guys have ever created. So if you, second backend server you guys have ever created, because technically whenever you start up your React is starting up that server for you. Reason why I'm breaking this up and making sure that we're all caught up is practice with the backend syntax, because it is JavaScript, but we're doing things a little differently. We're using require a little bit more. And we just want to make sure that we have terminal practice as well and have no problems. This is as basic as an API server as you can get. So we don't want to add in too many complexities before we get this up and running. So I'm going to shut up, and we have 7 votes in. So I'm going to give you guys a couple more minutes. Okay, we have 10 votes in, but I'm sensing people may need 1 more minute. So give everyone 1 more minute and then we will keep going. Okay, I'm gonna keep going unless someone screams bloody murder. All right. Oh, I did not mean to share that. Sorry. Okay. So I am gonna head back to my code and I've got my server running. I've got my hello world. Now, preemptively, we are going to solve 2 problems. One, we want to get cores out of the way because we're just running on localhost. We don't really care where the requests are coming in. We're not trying to lock down the server, make it secure or anything like that. So we're going to come in here. We are going to const pull in our cores like we pulled in Express. And then we are going to tell our server that is coming from Express to use the cores package to allow all cores requests. And I happen to know that we are going to be sending data back and forth using JSON. So we are going to preemptively solve that problem as well and pull in body parser from our require body parser. And then we are going to tell our server to use, and body parser needs a little bit more information because there are lots of different bodies it knows how to parse. And so we are going to tell it to use bodyparser.json. Now, I believe in the newer versions of Express, you can actually use a JSON parser that is built into Express. But because body parser works well and has literally millions of active weekly downloads, we're going to stick to using them. Okay, I'm going to save. Hopefully I didn't break anything in my server, but I'm just going to confirm that by refreshing on localhost 3001. That's still up and running. Okay. Now we can get our front end talking to our back end. So the whole objective of tonight is to make sure that our data is living on the server, right? All the messages we send they need to be in the state because they need to show up on our front end, but they need to be in the back end so we can tell other people about those messages. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my app.js. I'm going to take this array or these objects in the array and just take them out. So my messages, when it first loads, is going to be a clean slate. So I am going to keep my front end on the left side and my back end on the right side. So if you notice this window is not all the way to the left of the screen, that means I'm working in my back end code. And if you look at the front end code and notice that this edge isn't on the right of the screen, that's how you know I'm in my front end. You can also take a look at my terminal. My terminal says compiled successfully and says chat front end. So that's very clearly my front end code. And then over in my back end, you can see server listening on 3001. So you know that's my back end server code that's running. Yeah, I'll just make that a little bit more descriptive just in case you get lost. A lot of back end programming languages clearly don't use JavaScript. So it's a little easier to read the different syntax and know, oh, I'm writing PHP code or Python code or whatever it is. Node has the downside of not being able to easily tell if you're writing front end code or back end code. But you do have the benefit of being able to use the same syntax across both. And to prove that point, I'm going to take the messages that I just had in my front end and dump them right into my back end. And I took that from, in case you guys are looking, I went into my app.js, and in my use state, I took all the objects that were in there, just cut them out and dumped them right in my back end. And because we're using JavaScript on both the front end and the back end, we are able to use all of that syntax, all of the objects, all the arrays, all of that just gets dumped right into our back end.
Can you scroll down just a little bit so I can see if there's something overlap messages? Thank you.
Is that good?
The other way, I'm sorry. Yeah, that's good, thank you.
Okay, we're gonna do one more step and then we'll take a break for everyone. So we got our messages in our backend, right? How can I prove it's in my backend? Well, I can do a console log and console log out my messages. And here are all my messages coming out in my terminal. Okay, and I can, prove that I can access like an individual message by adding in an index, and then only that index will print out. And I can keep using my JavaScript and, pull the text out from one of those messages and see that there it is. Okay, but that's sitting in my backend. That's sitting in my code. How do I get access to that on my front end? I am going to pass it in, and I'm going to use fetch, and I am going to call something. You're all on the right line, but before I can do any of that, Susan, when you say call it, what is it? The message, yes. But before we can fetch something, we need to create we are going to create a function in the back end, an endpoint. You got it. So before we can fetch anything, we've got to have a route that we can go fetch, a route that we can go fetch. Well, in order to create that, we need to go in the back end and say, hey, you've got this data, allow people to go access that data. So we are going to server.get, and what do we want to get? We want to get our messages. Now we could name that anything, but we're going to try and follow a standard naming procedure here, so that if someone else were to use our API, they would kind of already know where they can access this data. Okay, well, our messages always gets a rec and a res. And we don't really care what's in the request because we know they are requesting the messages. So we are going to res.send our messages. And I'm going to send them in an object just in case down the road we need to send something more than just the messages. So I'm going to send that down. I'm going to save. I'm going to come back over to my front end. I'm going to refresh. I still have my hello world because we didn't change our root route, but I'm going to add in a /messages, and out come my messages. So I'm going to make sure I'm on localhost 3001/messages. I'm going to grab this code. I'm going to throw it in the channel.
Max, can I ask a question while you're doing that?
Shoot.
This is Latonia. Why would mine be structured differently? Did I forget a .json somewhere? Mine is just like a big paragraph as opposed to being structured.
You want to share your screen?
Can you see me?
Yes, I do have an extension installed in my browser that is making the JSON a little prettier. I will share that extension with you guys. So if let me go back to sharing my screen here. So you notice at the top, I've got this thing that says raw and parsed. And if I click on raw, it's probably going to look just like yours. But I have a Chrome extension installed that not only makes it easier and does the color highlighting for me, but also lets me like collapse sections of it, which makes it easier to dive down into the data. So let me grab that extension for you and I can share it. I will share that both in the chat and in student resources in Slack. And that's a free thing. I don't have any security concerns about it. I don't even think it has access to the internet. That is a concern sometimes when you install a Chrome extension, it gets access to not only your entire history, but all of the data on the page. And so, you know, when you load in your bank website and it's got your balance and your account number and your routing number, all of that, theoretically, a Chrome extension could get access to all of that information and steal it. So there are a lot of security checkpoints around Chrome extensions to make sure they can't do that. But this has so many reviews and so many uses that I'm not worried about them stealing the data. Browser extensions, though, you do have to be careful about for a security concern. Okay. So let's keep going. I want to get my messages into my front end. So I'm going to, well, I know it is running in my browser, right? Because I can see the messages and they're all there. So now I have exposed access through an endpoint to my messages object that is running in the backend. Yes, I am aware that these sentences are very vocab heavy. That is intentional. So if you guys hear me saying a word, or if you were thinking that that isn't what we are doing, feel free to interrupt me and be like, could you define that again? Or could you show me where we're doing that? Because I'm aware we're bouncing between a lot of different files right now. Okay, so I'm going to head over to my front end. And I would like my messages to load as soon as my component loads. So what do I use? What hook do I use in React to load something when my component loads? Use effect. You got it. So before I forget, I'm going to pull in use effect as part of my import. I'm going to come down here and I'm going to say use an effect. And that effect is going to run. And I don't want it to run every time my data changes. I only want it to run when the component first mounts. And so because of that, I do a comma and an empty array here. That is called the dependency array. And if we leave it empty, it is basically saying only run the first time the component mounts. Otherwise, that use effect is going to run every time we update state. And in this case, because we're updating the state on every letter press, it would literally make our API call every time we press the letter. Not that I've ever forgotten that dependency array and deployed that to production and then crashed our server or anything. So you've heard of a DDoS attack, or distributed denial of service attack. I literally made our customers DDoS us because every letter they typed in our software was going out and hitting our server. So you want to be careful and make sure you do not forget that dependency array. It's amazing what 2 little characters will do to due to ruin your entire day. Anyway, all right, so we're in our use effect. How do we go retrieve information from the backend? Fetch, you got it. So we are going to fetch, and fetch is going to be like, all right, where would you like me to fetch it from? So we are going to fetch it from localhost 3001. And what do we want to fetch? We want to fetch our messages. And then when you get the response from the server, you need to return the response JSON. And then once you have our JSON, let's not get too carried away. Let's just console log out our JSON. And save. Gonna come back over here. I'm gonna switch to my React tab. Gonna refresh. And I look in my console and whoa, I've got some messages in there. Pop that open and look in my messages. There are my messages. Well, that's quite handy. And you know, that format looks quite familiar. I think our front end is actually all lined up to take messages right out of those objects. So I can come over here and I can set my messages into state using my JSON messages. I'm actually going to change this to data because it's a little bit more widely used and may be a little clearer to understand. So I'm going to save that and come over here. Whoa, there are my messages. And yeah, they're in the console, and I can prove that they're coming from the server because those objects literally don't exist in our front end code anymore. But I can also go to the network tab and refresh and make sure I've got this open. And I can scroll through and see my messages fetch request. And in my 3001 messages, I'm making a GET request and it came back 200 OK. And I can go to the response and actually see all of my messages in here in the network tab as well. And they are all showing up in there. So going to take a break. Let everyone catch up. I will leave my code up here. I will share my code in Slack. And the two most recent files are basically the files we've been working in. Anyone is stuck or has questions or would like to screen share, feel free to let me know. We are 2 votes away from continuing.
Max, I'm still getting a warning from the missing key thing, and I've tried to change it several times about, we just added a key equaling index for the received messages, correct?
And the sent messages.
And the sent messages, yes. Just right in the return in the messages list, correct?
Yes. Do you want to share your screen? It's probably oh, or send a screenshot of it.
Yes, I can do that. I can do that. Yeah, no, it's just index, right? I've tried changing it to message.index too, and it is not happy about that either. Yeah, when I just have index, it does that. I'll just put it in the student pasted code.
Perfect.
If that's okay. Thanks.
So in your messages.map, Brielle, in addition to the message parameter that comes out of map, we need to add the index as well. Because index it needs to come from somewhere. And so the .map function is not only giving us access to the message itself, it's also telling us what index it is in.
Okay, and should it work if it was message.index to take the index directly from the order of the messages?
No, because the message object does not have a key on it called index.
Okay, all right, perfect.
Now,
Thank
if
you.
the messages did have a key in it called index, or more likely it would have a key in it called ID, that is what we would use for the key, and that would be much better. But we're kind of hacking it here and using the index just because we're not generating IDs yet.
Okay, I was thinking that was just sort of like a natural property to all objects.
No.
Thank you.
Dot length is one of them that you can really use. Dot length on a string, you can use dot length on an array. There are some native properties, but because the object kind of exists in a silo, we need to get the index out from the array. And so that's when we use the map to not only give us the access to the individual objects, but also to the index itself. I am 1 vote away from continuing on here. Okay, I'm going to keep going unless anyone has questions. Okay. So, we have our messages running from the server and reading from the server. What do you think is the next natural step? You need to post them to the server or create them on the server or send them to the server or whatever word you would like to use. Post is probably the most accurate, but we basically need to say, all right, we're sending a message, just get it up there in the server. So what we are going to do is we're going to go to our message input component, and we have our set messages here and our on submit. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually comment out our set messages just to start, because I want to get them up on the server before I do anything on the front end. So I'm going to come down here and I'm going to do yet another fetch. And yes, I could go copy and paste this, but it's good practice typing out all the syntax. And I am going to post to HTTP localhost 3001. And I'm still going to send it to my messages because that's where it makes sense to go. And we already said we needed to be clever here. We needed to post some data up. So we are going to use our method of post. And we are going to just see if that's working to start. So I'm going to say then whatever data comes back, we are going to return the actually that's the response that comes back. We are going to return the response.json, and then we are going to take our data that happens to be parsed JSON and console log out our data so we can see it. So I pop over to my code. I refresh to make sure we're up to date. I'm going to type in ABC, hop over to my console, hit send, and I get post 404 not found. Okay, let me go to my server code. Well, I've got messages right here. Why can't it find it? Server's running. And if we look at our code, we know the server's running because it's in our app.js. It's fetching my messages. Otherwise, it wouldn't be showing up. So why can't I get away with this fetch here? The front end and the back end are all about matching things up. What are the two things that need to match when I have a request that I want to match up to a route or an endpoint? It is a post problem. Yes, the method does not line up. We have our server.get messages, but we don't have a server.post messages. So I'm going to come down here. I'm going to say server.post messages. And that still takes a rec and res as always. And I'm just going to res.send messages, and we'll say messages go here. So I'm going to save that. I'm going to come over here. I'm going to refresh. I'm going to type in ABC, and I get my messages go here. All right, we just tested a whole bunch of things by just sending back messages go here. We made sure that the post was working. We created a new endpoint. We made sure we were accessing the right endpoint in the front end. We made sure that the data was coming back, and we made sure that we were parsing out the data and actually being able to access it in the front end. So all of that was just accomplished by just creating a couple lines of code in the back end. Okay, that's great. We tested it. We got some dummy data showing up there, but I would like to add the message into my array on the back end. Well, in order to add it in the back end, what do I have to do on the front end? in order to add the data in the back end, what do I have to do on the front end? You are all probably overcomplicating what I am asking. We have to have the data to add. Exactly. We are saying, hey, go post to the messages. And the server's like, great, I got your post request. What would you like me to add? And we're not adding anything. So what are the 3 ways we can send data to the server that we have already covered? We can do a query parameter, which is your question mark and adding in the keys. And that's probably the second best option because we can actually send a lot of data in the query parameters. We can use a route method or a route method. So not R-O-O-T or R. Instead, we would use an R-O-U-T-E, a route method. That is totally on me for pronouncing them interchangeably, and they are different things. The route, again, is just our URL with a slash at the end and nothing else. Our route is the navigation that is pointing us to our endpoint code. So yes, we can use our route parameters, but route parameter is probably not the best example here because we're sending in a couple pieces of data. And so out of our 3 options, that would probably be the worst of the 3. And then we have our final way we could do it, which is either a put or a post. Those are the methods, but where do we shove the data when we use those methods? Into the body, yes. We will need to use the headers to tell the server what is in the body, what kind of data is in the body. But yes, we're going to use the body to send that data up. So 2 things we need to do when we are adding in the body. We know the internet can only send strings, right? It can't send objects. It can't keep track of all of that. So we need to json.stringify the message that we want to send. Well, the message we want to send is similar to this structure. Actually, it's right down here. This is what I would like to send. So in my JSON stringify, I am going to add in my body, and my body is going to have these 3 pieces of information, and we are going to send that string up. But then, okay, so let's do that. We're going to save that. We're going to come back over to our backend, and we are just going to console log out our rec.body. Why is it rec? Because it's the request coming in. We're not sending any data back other than our messages go here. So we are looking in the request, the data coming into the server to figure out what's in the body. So I'm going to save. I'm going to save my front end. I'm going to go over to the front end. I'm going to refresh. I'm going to type in ABC. My messages go here, still coming back from the server. But what I'm curious about is what's in my body. Well, my body is empty. Well, the body shouldn't be empty because I'm json.stringifying. But the problem here is this is now just text to the server. So we need to give Express a heads up and say, hey, body parser, I know we set you up, but we're actually sending in JSON here. So because we're telling you you're sending in JSON, please parse my string back into the object so I can access it in rec body. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add another thing here called headers. And that is going to have a key of I can't remember it off the top of my head. It is going to take a content type. And the content type is going to be application JSON. And if you go, Max, why is it application JSON? That seems like there could be hundreds of different values there. And oh, there are headers that could probably be reused in a lot of different situations. If you just search for content type headers, you will get a very long list of the commonly used headers. So the front end knows exactly what to tell it in the request, and the server knows exactly what to expect in the backend. So I'm going to save. I'm going to come over to my code. I am going to refresh and send a message. And I get my messages go here. That's fine. What I care about is the fact that I now have access in my rec.body to the message that is coming in. Well, now we know we've got access to the message. All we need to do is add our message to the array. And then I'm going to console log out my messages. Okay, I come over here, I refresh, I type in ABC, I hit send. I come over here, and here's my ABC message, but it is in my array with the other messages in there. Okay, that's all pretty cool, but the message is disappearing here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, after we add it into the array, hey, server, go send all of my messages back to the front end. Because we've added in that message that you have sent, now let's add it, let's send that data back. So I'm going to go back over to my front end code, and I'm going to say, then when you get the data back, we want to set our messages to whatever data from the server is coming back in the messages. I'm going to save. I'm going to come over here. I'm going to refresh. I'm going to type in ABC. I'm going to hit send, and my message shows up. I'm going to say DEF, and I'm going to hit send, and DEF shows up. But over here in the server, we see that the messages in this array, we keep on adding to them. So I'm going to do one more example, and then we will take our 7 o'clock break. So what happens if I want to send a message from another page? So I come over here, I'm going to open up in a new tab. And for the first time, you can see ABC and DEF are here. There's persistence. Even though we're in a new tab, it's not just clearing out the data, it's holding on to that data for as long as the server runs. So if I restart the server, we're going to lose all of that data. But if I come over here and I send 1, 2, 3, okay, well, 1, 2, 3 is sent. But if I go back to my other tab, my 1, 2, 3 isn't here. If I refresh it, then my 1, 2, 3 is here. But what if I would like it to say, hey, every 30 seconds, go see if there are new messages. And if there are just go check the messages. If there are messages there, update our messages in the state. So what I'm going to do is in our app.js, we've got our fetch happening here, and we know our fetch works. What I'm going to do is I'm going to say at a set interval, and what is that interval going to be? That's going to be 30,000 milliseconds or 30 seconds. So this code is going to run every 30 seconds. And all we need to do is take in our fetch, which we know is working on component mount, and dump it into our set interval. So I'm going to come over here. I'm going to refresh. I'm actually going to reboot my server to just clear out the messages that we had sent in. I'm going to refresh here. I think the problem is set interval does not run until 30 seconds has passed. And so if I keep delaying here, I am hopeful that my messages will eventually show up. One way to speed it up, though, will be to send a message and have them pop in. So I sent ABC here. I'm going to go over to my other tab. ABC is not here. But if we wait 30 seconds, hopefully, magically, without refreshing, ABC shows up. 30 seconds may be a long time. I picked that time knowing that I am going to connect all of you guys into my computer in a couple minutes, and don't want requests coming in more than every 30 seconds because it's every 30 seconds times however many students are in tonight. And so I did a longer time. If you would like to experiment with a shorter time, you are welcome to do that in your code. But it is 7 o'clock. We've got our messages not only pulling from the server, but also sending to the server. And because we're using a server, we can test that across multiple tabs and see our persistence. And we have told our computer, hey, every 30 seconds, go check for messages, pull in any new messages, and show it. All right, that's pretty cool. Before we go on break, let's set out our objectives. We need to get our edit button working. We need to get our delete button working, and we need to get our servers all kind of talking to each other. So I am going to show you a tool called ngrok, and we are going to install that. And what ngrok does for us is it punches a tunnel through to the internet. So it bypasses all of the firewalls we have on our computer, and it says, hey, for one particular port that you would like to open up, we will open that up to the public internet and take care of all the voodoo under the hood to make sure that your computer is actually accessible on the internet. So we are going to do that on my computer with ngrok. And I am going to share my URL with you guys. You can put that in your front end for where we're sending the requests. And you will actually see messages every 30 seconds, not only pop up on my computer, but also pop up on your computers. That is coming up after the break. We will take a 15-minute break now, be back at 7:20. I'm going to take a 5-minute break now, and I will be back at 7:10. But before I go on break, I will share my app.js with you guys and my server.js in Slack. I will see you guys in 5 minutes if you have any questions. Otherwise, I will see you at 7:20.
Can you hear me now?
We can.
Oh my, okay, okay.
I am back if anyone has questions.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions that I was gonna ask. I asked earlier, but I guess the mic wasn't working. Um, I was driving, so I think it went to like drive mode or whatever. And anyways, the point is, so for the, I guess the map, like mapping.
Yep.
I know you said there's a second element.
Yep.
Well, I was wondering about the third element. Is it like the array portion? Like, is that for like destructuring or maybe not?
There is no third parameter in the map element.
Oh.
There is we are passing in a function that is what, and that function runs for every element in the messages array. And so the two parameters that that function takes is the object we are accessing and then the index of that object. And then whatever is returned from that map function is what our React renders.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I don't know. When I opened VS Code and like it gave me like a weird. Okay, that's cool.
It is possible that map takes more. It has more parameters that it can provide us, but those are the only two that we need.
Okay.
Latonia, code working means that you are able to send messages and have them appear on the back end. And then after 30 seconds, between 0 and 30 seconds, and another tab see that message.
I'm sorry, Max. Is it okay if I share my screen? Because I feel like I'm missing something.
I have a quick question too. Can you post your messages input
Already
file?
did.
My fetch thing is all messed up. Okay, I'll look for it. I didn't see it, but
I just posted it during the break. I also shared a link to my VS Code. I think we tried to do that earlier, but because it was like the first week of class, it wasn't easy to get in. If you guys want to try that, that will give you access to my code as I'm typing it. So we can give that a try if you are interested. But I did post my message input right above that.
yeah. If you could go, sorry, go ahead, Latonia. I have a question after.
No, it's okay. I was just wondering if that was the live share that we had used before.
It is.
Oh, okay.
I just want to ask if you could go slower when you do the fetch stuff, because we're not as familiar with that syntax and I keep messing it up and then having errors and not being able to continue following along.
Sure. At 7:20, I will talk through the fetch of the post body and all of that, because if you were falling behind, chances are other people did as well. So I will talk through that. You
flip to the next screen and I can't see it anymore. And yeah.
Yeah, I'll talk through that.
Thank you.
No problem. And
Hey,
Latonia,
Max.
feel free to share your screen whenever you're ready.
Sorry.
I just feel like I missed a bunch of stuff because why am I still looking at this? I'm not supposed to be looking at this, right?
So you're supposed to be in 3000, localhost 3000, because we want to be looking at where our React code is running, not where our backend code is running.
Okay, I'm sorry. So then you said when I type something in here, it should pop up, and this should be 3000 as well?
Yep.
Okay.
So if you send a message in one of them, you should be able to go to the other one. And within 30-ish seconds, without refreshing, because you have your set interval set up, it should eventually show up in that tab as well.
Okay.
And just looking at your code, everything looks right there. So I think we just have to wait it out.
Oh, it did, yeah. Now, if I change that to 5,000, that's 5 seconds, right?
Correct.
I wanted to test it quicker. Okay.
1,000 milliseconds in a second. So that's why anything times 1,000 is going to give you the value in milliseconds.
Okay. Now, this is exactly the technology. You know how on our phones it says, do you want push notifications? This is that, isn't it?
Push notifications is sockets. It's more similar to sockets.
Sometimes they call it pop, and sometimes I've seen it as push, but are they the same difference?
Pop is only related to email, but pop would use the exact same technique that we are using of, hey, every 30 minutes, go ask the server, or every 10 minutes, or however, you can set the refresh to whatever you want. But you're basically saying on pop, hey, go check the server for new messages, pull it down, and if they're there, that's great. Push notifications are more similar to WebSockets in that the server can send a message without you having to explicitly ask, hey, are there any new messages? Hey, are there any new messages on a timeout? We won't be covering sockets today, but Ryan, I believe, is covering them Saturday at 9 a.m. And so I'm going to try and tune into that as well, because I've used WebSockets, but I don't know WebSockets. Like, I wouldn't be able to teach them. Definitely not off the top of my head. So I will be interested to see what he presents there, because I think he has at least 10 times more WebSocket experience than I do, if not significantly more.
Max?
Sure, go ahead.
Sorry. Oh, I still receive the JSON formatted text.
Okay. Can you share your screen?
Yeah, sure. I believe it's connected to the server, because without the messages, I was able to get the hello world.
Okay, so you are at 3001 right now. We want to switch to 3000, which is where our React server is running. Okay, and so site cannot be reached means your React server isn't running. So let's go to your front end code and go ahead and so that's your back end. I think your front end's over on the left there. Yep. If you can right click like on message input, you should be, or that works too, open an integrated terminal, and then you're going to npm start there, because we use npm start with React. And that is going to pull up your messages. So you should be able to send a message and have your messages just pop in. Okay, beautiful. And if you copy that and go into a new tab, and just make sure you're on 3000 there, not 3001. In 30 seconds, you should see all of your messages come in from the other tab. And if you send a message in this tab, you can go back to the other tab and see the message appear there in roughly 30 seconds.
Yeah, thank you. Yep, got it. Thanks.
Pretty impressive that you were able to code along without testing.
Thank you.
Susan, do you want to share your screen?
Yes. Yep. I had one spelling error and I fixed it, but it's still, something's still wrong.
Okay. Let's
And I was looking at this VM, but I don't know what that is. Oh.
That is probably in your send of the message, but yeah, we can start there. So go to your front end code. And go to your message input. Okay, so you've got your post happening, you've got your content in, you're stringifying your text, you're getting the result, and you're setting it to data messages. All of that is good. We want to comment out lines 25 through wherever that ends, 25 through 32. because we're accomplishing that same thing in line 22.
Oh, right. Okay.
That I don't think is your problem. Let's head over, save and head over to app.js. And you've got your fetch for your messages here, and you're getting the data, you're returning the JSON, we're running it every 30 seconds, and you're setting your messages in. So I don't see any problems there. Let's head to your backend. All right, you are getting your messages, you are sending your messages, and then you've got your server post with a missing slash.
Oh. That's weird, but it didn't point me to that.
No, but it did 404 and tell you it couldn't find it.
Yeah. So now when I type stuff in, it should.
Yep, you want to refresh just to clear out your console and make sure you've got your latest code.
Okay.
And now you should be able to send. And if you pop over to another tab at 3000, not 3001.
Do a different 3000?
Doesn't matter. We're not going to use that other tab anymore.
Okay.
And if you send a message in here, we can go over to your first tab or the other tab running this, and your eye
Oh.
already showed up.
So that's how we know we're connected.
Correct.
Okay. Neat. Thank you.
Max, I just realized this is exactly what we did with Ryan when he had us set up the 2 terminals and all of that. That's so cool. But we never got to do it with each other because we couldn't get, I think it was Postman, we couldn't get the, okay. I see you shaking your head, so I'm assuming I can stop talking.
It's almost like us instructors coordinated all of this. I only have 5 responses on the poll. So if you can switch to Zoom and give me some feedback on if you have it working or if you don't, and just want to keep going, go ahead and vote. If you need some more time, don't vote, and keep working on it and keep throwing out questions. So far, everyone who has needed help literally only in one place, and then they got it all working. So if you are stuck and are frustrated, I don't think you are far behind. Carolyn, that's a good question. I don't know what folder I'm working in. I didn't end up creating separate days in the My Code folder. I just put everything in week 1. But then in the classroom repo, I've been posting it in the day folder once we are done with that day. So we started, the code that we started with at the beginning of day 4 today is the code that we finished with at the end of day 3 in the classroom repo. And so at the end of class today, I will create the day 4 folder and put that into the classroom repo. But if you want to copy the code from day 3 into a new folder called day 4 and then catch up over there, you can do that, if that makes sense.
I'm good. I just want to make sure I'm in the right spot. And, you know, it's been a day of doing stupid things like losing all my files. So God only knows what I'll do next.
Those days happen.
Oh, yeah. And I can't possibly destroy your VS Code Live share. So
No, I
think we're
set
good.
that to read only.
Yeah, you knew I was there. That's why.
During the first cohort, I left it, I didn't set it to read only. And I was thinking like, oh, we'll do this like group code together experience and we'll let the students go in and code. But then we started working in multiple files. And people weren't following along or would be in the different tab on their computer. And then like suddenly something would magically stop working. And I would be like, what the heck? And I'd have to go through each individual file and find where the change was. So yeah, we're not going to repeat that experiment in this cohort. I finally learned just mark it as read only. All right, I've got 7 votes in, so I am still hearing we need a minute to catch up. If you are ready to steam forward, whether or not you have it working, go ahead and vote. Otherwise, I will wait and give you guys a couple more minutes.
Max, I have another quick question. Can you give us some tips about backing up our files? I think somebody else shared that they lost files. And I'm just curious what we can do to try to.
Yeah, great question. So a couple things. Professionally in the work world, everyone uses Git. And as opinionated as the programming world is, you can literally walk into any bar with programmers and say, I think JavaScript is the best programming language, and at least receive one punch in the face. There is a lot of opinions of what programming languages are great or better. There are a lot of opinions on what frameworks to use. There are literally opinions of whether or not you should store tabs in your files or store spaces in your files. I am not kidding you. That is probably the most contested topic across programmers. There are literally people who hit the space bar 4 times to indent their files instead of hitting the tab key. Whole topic, I will bite my tongue and not launch into an entire spiel about that. Anyway, you asked about backing up files. Git is the way programmers agree to collaborate on files. Git is complicated. I know we covered a little bit of it, but the reason why Git is so great in backing up your files is it tracks the changes across your files. And it also allows you to work with other programmers, which I know is not a concern right now. So if you are comfortable committing your code and pushing your code, Git is probably the best way to back up, only because professionally, that is the way programmers collaborate and share code together and back up their code. If you are not comfortable with Git, which I totally get, and you want to kind of push that off, the other great way to back up your files is by right-clicking on the folder they are in and hitting the compress and then quote and then whatever the file name is. That is going to make a zip backup for you that is going to have all of your files in it, and you can just rename that to like the timestamp of whatever you're backing it up. And then you've got one file that is containing your entire folder and all of your files inside of it. And then you can go back that up wherever you want. Google Drive, Dropbox, OneDrive, all great options, all have free tiers. They all struggle a little bit when you're saving your programming files directly into Dropbox, because there are so many tiny little files inside of node modules that it becomes hard to back all of them up. But if you compress them down into a zip file and upload that one zip file, Google Drive, Dropbox, OneDrive, wherever you're storing it in the cloud will do fine with that. So the high-tech answer, the thinking about professional development on the way forward, investing the time into Git is probably worth it. The less high-tech version of still backing up your files but not running into a problem of having too many programming files to back up is to zip your files before you back them up. Latonia, that is a question of how to pull a previous version. I am going to punt that to another week to cover that. However, you have me for a whole 4 weeks after this week, so I will promise to get to that at some point. I also can lump that in with setting up your Git ignore, so it's not backing up your node modules every time you commit something into Git. That's another thing that I promised I would cover and haven't yet. So I will definitely cover that. Carolyn, to your point, iCloud Drive, completely fine to back up there. You may run into issues if you're storing your files in there and actively editing them, because the cloud doesn't like to sync as many file saves as we are doing as a programmer line by line as we go through it. So I keep my files on my desktop and don't have my desktop sync up to the cloud, but then I am constantly committing my code in. So I'm always able to, from Git, pull down my code if I were to lose something on my computer. With that said, I use a 3-tier backup system. Git is my primary line of defense and where I store all of my code. I run a cloud backup called Backblaze. I think I pay $100 a year and get unlimited file storage there. And that backs up my entire computer every week or two. And then every 6 months, I go into my fireproof safe, pull out an external hard drive that's like $50-$60, back up my entire computer on there and throw it in there. Am I paranoid? Absolutely. Is 1 backup enough? Probably. Is 2 even better? Yes. Is 3 the best? No, because you could always have more backups, I suppose. But I've never needed the backup in the safe, but I've always known, you know, if something goes horribly wrong or I can't wait for the cloud backup to download and I scoop something up over in Git, I know that I always have that there for older files. Paranoia, yes. Git's probably the best answer. But yeah, iCloud Drive is a fine option to use from there. Any other questions on that, or did I miss anything higher up in the chat? Dominique, the 404 you're getting, is that on the live share or your own code?
That's on the live share. Like when you go and you type in my web address, it pops up as 404. And for the life of me, I've been trying to troubleshoot it today, earlier, and now I have no clue what I did wrong.
You talking about the domain that we bought a couple weeks ago, or a different thing that you were trying to load?
The domain we bought. I think my domain, there's something wrong with my domain, I think, because I can't figure in, like, VS Code's not saying anything. GitHub, I looked inside and out, it's not saying anything. So I have no clue what's going on with my capstone.
My guess is it's an issue with your DNS, and the DNS is what tells Namecheap to go look at GitHub for your code. However, if you would like to schedule one-on-one time with me, I believe I have a lot of slots open on Saturday still. So if you're available and want to grab a time, should only take us a half hour to go through it, if not less, and we can get that fixed and wired up. And that goes for anyone who would like to continue working on their personal website or would like to revisit that domain that we bought. If you would like to spend time on that, that is a perfectly fine thing to talk about in one-on-ones.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, because it's showing up in Finder, like my whole project showing in Finder, but whenever you like put it in the web address is like 404 GitHub page, check GitHub. I'm checking GitHub and nothing. It's like no errors whatsoever. Everything's clean and in green.
It will likely be you know, a 30-second fix for a problem that's been bothering you for a month. But I'm happy to spend time on that and dig into it. I threw my calendar link in the chat, so feel free to schedule time on that.
Thanks, Max.
No problem.
Did you change anything besides those 3 files that you posted? Because I missed like the last 5 minutes of class trying to fix my fetch thing. I got all my code like in separate folders or in separate files that I can go back to later from the video, but I'm just literally trying to get it working by pasting your code into my stuff so I can participate in the group chat thing.
Pretty sure that is all that I changed. If you were getting an error, feel free to share.
No error. It's just that the ABC that I'm sending is popping up right away. There's no 30-second delay.
It will pop up right away in the tab that you're currently in. But if you open a second tab and send a message in the second tab, when you go back to the first tab, it could take up to 30 seconds for it to show up.
Okay, I missed that part too. Thank you.
Other questions? Okay, I promised Kyle that I would go through the fetch because that's probably the newest concept that we are learning. And I probably steamrolled my way right through that. So let's go through that and just talk it through. So fetch built into JavaScript, that's why we don't have to import it, because every modern web browser supports fetch right out of the box. The first parameter fetch always takes is the URL. Now, through our route parameters and our query parameters, we have proven that we can send data through the URL. However, when we are trying to send something like an object that has multiple keys or multiple pieces of data, it's more common to use the request body. And if we're using the request body, we can't use a get request, because get requests don't support the body. Pretty much every other kind of request type does support a body. So anyway, first parameter is always the URL in our fetch. Second parameter takes a object. And the reason it takes an object is because there are probably 30 different keys that we can use in here to tell fetch to change up the behavior that in this request. The first one, and probably the most common one we use, is the method. And so we use the method of post in here. Later tonight, we are going to see other kinds of methods that we are using in there. Then we added in a object called headers. And we use an object, again, because we can actually send multiple headers into our server. So we use content type as the key, and then application JSON as the value of that header to tell Express, hey, I'm sending you a body, and that body is just a string, but I'm also telling you that string is formatted using JSON. So when the Express server gets it, body parser looks at the content type and goes, oh, you're sending me JSON. I know how to pull apart that body. And then finally, we are sending the body itself. The headers exactly look just like Axios, and you'll find those headers are exactly the same in Postman and a couple others, because headers are a pretty widely agreed upon thing, so that if I send this request to my backend in Express, it cannot understand it. But if another company has written a backend in Python or in Ruby on Rails or anything like that, they can understand, oh, you're sending me JSON as well. I can pull the data out from that. And then we send in our body. And so the internet struggles to send a raw object. And so what we do is we convert that object into a string using json.stringify. Now, this entire object is the options that we are passing into fetch to control how our request gets made. Once we close out that parenthesis, fetch is giving us a promise. It is saying, all right, I'm off running that data. I promise to give it to you. But when I give it to you, I'm going to give it to you as a response. And so we get that, we get the promise back, and we say, then when we get the promise, take the response, and we know that it's JSON coming out. So parse that JSON for us. And then once you have the JSON ready, we get access to that data. And so from the data, we are pulling out our messages. Our messages are coming in from our post request, and we are setting them into the state. Any questions on that? Okay.
So you're passing
Go ahead.
the last dot then data, that parameter there, you're passing res.json into there because it's returning from above there, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, so the result of this res.json comes into the data here.
Mhm.
And then we use that now parsed data to set that into our state.
Okay.
And we're accessing our state through the props that gets passed in.
Okay, thank you. Most of the mistakes I was making, I had curly braces in the wrong place in the fetch part in the top. I had like after the post, and yeah. So just have to practice that.
If you're understanding that, if you're understanding this, then you're good to go. Personally, I think this code is hard to read. And so I'm going to show you guys how to do this as an async await, just so you can see it as an alternative. If you understand this, if you don't want to push your luck, just tune out for the next 3 minutes. So what I'm going to do is, in order for us to use async await, we have to mark the whole function as async, because we can't use the await keyword without the function that we are using it in being labeled as asynchronous. And so we can take this code. I'm just going to comment all this out. And I'm going to say our const response, and then await for the fetch to come in. And then our const data is going to come in from our await for the response.json to be available. And then I can set my messages from the data.messages. So I'm going to come back to my code. I'm going to refresh. I'm going to send ABC, and it's still working. So I personally find this easier to understand, because basically what's happening is our fetch is going on, and our fetch is a promise. And what we're basically saying is await for that promise to be done running. And when it is done running, shove it in res. Okay, now we take our res.json, and that's going to take a minute to run. So just wait for it to be done running and then shove that response into the data. Okay, now we've got our data. Now that's not a promise anymore. So we can just access it with .messages. So either way, it's completely fine. This is the newer style. This makes a lot more sense to me than promises do. I understand how they both work. It's pretty rare for you to create a promise yourself. It is very common for you to get data back as a promise and have to .then it or await for that data to be ready. So whatever way works for you, this personally makes more sense, but doesn't matter. Just like we did the array push. Yes, you have not been in callback hell since then. There was a very interesting conversation among the instructors of how we should teach the database. There was a conversation around TypeScript and whether we should go into TypeScript. And the bulk of the instructors agreed that keeping it in JavaScript was the way to go. However, I am going to push you guys on async await in the database, because anytime we send data into the database or get data back from the database, it comes back as a promise. And so I will be using async await in all of my example code in the next 2 weeks when we are interacting with the database. Line 7, mine is not in 2 different typefaces. Am I missing something? This and this are the same color on line 7?
Yeah, it's weird because I'm doing the live demonstration. So it's not my code, and the HTTP is in blue and the rest is in gray. And I didn't know if that meant something, but I'm looking at the zoom of your code and it is all one color. So whatever. I just didn't know if I caught something we needed to catch. That's all.
Nope. Everything's working there. So I want to clean up one more thing before we get our edit working. It's pretty weird that we have to wait 30 seconds for our messages to show up on the first load. So what we could do is be extremely lazy and take this entire fetch and put it outside of my set interval. And then my messages load in, and every 30 seconds they are going to update. But that's pretty lazy, right? That breaks every dry, don't repeat yourself principle. So what we're going to do is we are going to say const load messages, and we are going to make that a function on its own. And then in our use effect, when it first runs, we are going to load our messages. And then every 30 seconds, we are also going to load our messages. And so we just created a reusable function up here by taking our entire fetch, throwing it in a separate function. Then we call it when the use effect first runs. And then we also call it every 30 seconds. And that solves the problem of when our page first loads, it loads the data in right away.
You made your whole fetch request into load messages.
Correct.
Okay, hold on. I gotta catch up.
So I'm going to put this in the pasted code channel in case you are behind, just so I can keep going on the exciting part. So let's get our servers talking to each other. So if you look, I'm using localhost 3001, right? But if you tried to send a message to my server, it would never get through, right? Because localhost is literally local to me. That is my own computer. There's no way that you can access my computer, my port 3001. But there is a really cool tool called ngrok, N-G-R-O-K. And if you go to ngrok.com, it says public URLs for testing your, and it happens to start with chatbot. Hey, that's cool. That's what we're working on. So we can get started for free. And it may make you sign up. It didn't used to. I'm going to jump down to the download page. Oh, yeah, it is making you sign up. Okay, so if you sign up, let's see if I have my account saved. Oh, I got lucky. So go ahead and sign up for an account. And eventually you should get to your getting started page. You don't need to follow along with this to test in the example of us sending messages to each other. ngrok is a super helpful tool for testing your code on other devices. So if you want to install this, you can. It is not a requirement. I'm just using it for the example. So if you go into and click on your auth token, it should give you the information you need for the getting started. I'm not going to click on that because that's unique to my account, and I don't want to send that out on YouTube and have other people be able to access my auth token. Jaquil, another person in your network can't connect to localhost, but they can use what is called your private or your internal IP address to connect to your computer, as long as your firewall on your computer is set up to allow incoming connections. So you could use like your 192.168 IP address. You could use that on the same network to connect into your computer on a different device. If you go to the ngrok getting started guide, under the download, they're going to tell you that you can download this file, and then you can add in your ngrok and then fire it up using the ngrok command. So again, this is not a requirement. I'm just showing you the steps here. I'm not going to go through step by step, but if you would like to do this, you are totally welcome to. Once you get it set up, you can open up a terminal, and I can run a command called ngrok, and I am going to HTTP, and then it needs to know what port I want to share. So I am going to share port 3001. And that is going to do some magic for me and basically open up a tunnel from the public internet straight down into my own localhost server on port 3001. And so it is telling me I now have this URL. And if I load this URL, I can get my hello world that is running. And not only can I get my hello world, I can go to my messages and see all the messages I have sent. Okay, so I'm going to share this in the chat, and you can copy that URL and go into your code, and wherever you see localhost 3001, replace it with my ngrok URL. So there are two places you need to send that, to update that. First, in your load messages, and then also in your message input, because that's where you are sending the messages. And so if you have been following along, you should be able to put my ngrok URL in there, both in message input and in app.js. And if I switch over to my app.js, I'm going to just leave this up. And we will see if anyone can send it. I will also put it in Slack.
Do we need to do anything with that auth token too?
No, the auth token is only required for me turning on ngrok on my computer.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah, so if you wanted to get ngrok working on your own computer, you would have to set up your computer to know the auth token. And the auth token, by the way, is what is tying the account that you just created online, so your computer knows how to use that account without having to sign in.
Okay, Max, I apologize that you have to repeat this, but what is it that I'm copying to put in?
You are copying that entire ngrok URL that is in both chat and in the student pasted code channel.
Oh, okay.
And then you are going to paste that in two places. You're going to paste it wherever you see http://localhost:3001. You are going to replace that entire part of the URL with that ngrok URL. And you need to do that in two places. You need to do that in app.js, and you also need to do that in message input.
And keep the slash messages at the end. I just noticed that.
Correct. Yes, keep the slash messages at the end. And
Okay.
so you should be able to switch over to, I'm getting a CORS error that I did not anticipate getting. Fresh. Let me look at my backend server. I have never gotten a CORS issue using ngrok before. Make sure I have CORS set up properly. Use CORS. Yeah, and we know that has to be working because it was letting my 3001 through. Okay, let me try this. I'm going to stop my ngrok and restart it with a command that I found on Stack Overflow to basically say, don't be a little pain in my butt with CORS. See if it works. Nope. Well, that's a bummer. I may not be able to pull this off. I wonder if I try. Let's just try this and see if I any more luck. I'm going to try and tell it to do my fetch a little differently and ignore chords. Nope. Well, that's a bummer. If I can figure out a solution to that, I will. I have tried to disable chords on my server by using the chords middleware. And that didn't seem to do it. And then I tried to disable chords on my front end as well in the fetch request. And that is having the same problem. And you rarely want to use that mode node course. I'm just trying to figure out, I've never run into a cores issue on ngrok. I can try and use the cores options on the back end. Let's see if that helps with anything. If I do origin and then grab my ngrok URL. See if I have any more luck with that. Server rebooted, refresh. Nope. Let me try. What if I make my origin my local host? Oh, damn it, Max. I think no, that won't work either. All right, I'm gonna keep going on what I wanted to accomplish because I don't want to derail us too much. Try one more code snippet to see. We disable cores and try a middleware. No, did not like that either. Okay, I will try and fix that after class, and if I get it working, I will share it with you guys either during office hours or on Monday. Ngrok is normally a great way to tunnel into the server. and you can see that it is running. And if I come in here and grab a new URL, you can actually see the request that my front end is making to my server. So when I refresh it, you can see it's actually using that URL and coming up in my terminal and making the request through the internet to my local server. The problem that we are running into is that CORS is being a little pain in the butt and not allowing me to access the information. And normally you can go into your Express and just say, hey, allow any CORS requests to come in using server.use CORS. But the problem that we're running into is that I don't have control over ngrok's CORS, the ngrok CORS configuration. So I can't tell ngrok, hey, it's okay to allow requests to come in from my localhost 3000. It's going to bother me until I have it fixed. So you can be assured that I will have a fix in eventually. But what we are going to do is we're going to roll forward with, I'm going to put this back on my localhost 3000. And then we will practice sending messages to each other another day once I figure out ngrok. Okay, so I am going to get back on track of where I was trying to do is I want to get my edit and my delete to work. So I'm going to switch over to my front end code. And I'm going to go find wherever we have our edit button, which is going to be in our message list. And we've got our edit here. Now, what was the thing, if you remember in module 4, when we click the edit button, what do we need to know?
The index of which one you're editing.
Exactly. And so what we are going to do is we're passing the key index in already, but React gets really cranky when you use that key for something other than what React uses under the hood. So we're actually going to pass another prop and we will call it index. And we aren't going to do that on any of the received messages because you don't have the ability to edit a received message, but you do on the sent message. So we're going to add another prop index there. And then what we are going to do is we are going to add a on click to our span, and we are going to say edit clicked. And then up at the top, we are going to create our const edit clicked. And we are going to do something when the edit is clicked. Well, we need to go update that message over at the server. So we are going to fetch. And where are we going to fetch? We are going to fetch at localhost 3001 because ngrok hates me. Oh, did I do something dumb? Let me try one more thing. I realized I was pointing at 3000, not 3001. Yahtzee, we're back in business. Okay, I did a stupid thing. I had ngrok looking at port 3000. 3000 is our front end. I wanted you guys connected to 3001, which is our back end. So I'm going to try this one more time. If you put that URL and that URL, I'm going to delete the old one in Slack. I cannot do the same in Zoom. If you put that URL into your message input and also into your app.js, wherever you see the http://localhost 3000, you still want the /messages to be part of the URL. But if you put that in there and send a message in under 30 seconds, and I'm actually going to lower that time on my front end down to every, let's say, 5 seconds. I hopefully will see a message you guys have sent. I got a hi, Max. I don't know who sent it, but someone sent a hi, Max. Susan, you made it through. Proving that its servers are worth it. Anyone else gonna try to send a message? Oh, why is it doing? We'll refresh the page, we'll see. The server is back to being a pain on cords. We had literally just fixed that. 43. I'm gonna just put it back to localhost and see if we have any more luck. All right, well, we got one message through. I guess that's better than nothing. So ngrok normally works a lot better than that. I'm not sure what the cords issues are going there on there, but we did get a message through. So just proving that the server is working. All right, little side tangent there. Let's go back to our message input or message list. Okay, so we've got our edit on click, and we are going to look at localhost 3001, and we are going to go still to our messages, but this time we are going to use a route parameter to tell it what message we are going to edit. And so because we are in a template literal, we have our backtick. So I am going to do our template literal syntax to drop in a variable, and I am going to drop in the props.index. So that is coming in, and we are going to use that in the URL. Caitlin did throw something in of, did we hit a limit on ngrok? Because ngrok does have limits of how many requests we can make. It is possible, but I'm getting a CORS error on it. Oh, Ariel, you did get a too many connection error. So maybe that is the problem, is we just have too many people trying to use it at once. But anyway, we will surge forward and use our edit and delete, and we will be good to go. Okay, so I'm passing in the props.index. That is coming in from my index prop, which is coming in from my map. So I know what message I am trying to edit. And then I need to tell it, hey, we are going to use a method to make that request. And what kind of method do we use when we want to edit the data?
You use, I guess, I don't know, use state.
No, we're not doing anything in this state. This is all getting data to send up to the backend. So we are going to use put. So we use post to send new data up. We use put to edit some data. Okay, so we've got our method in there now. Now we need to tell it, well, what are we going to edit it to, right? And so we are going to use our body, and we need to stringify it. And before we can even send that data in, we need to tell it, hey, we are sending you some headers because the content type that we are sending in is application JSON. And then we need to send it what we are editing it to. Well, we didn't figure that out yet. So before we even do our fetch request, we are going to say changed text is equal to window.prompt. What would you like to change the message to? Okay, now that we've got that text, we can say text is going to be changed text. And Kyle, thank you for that catch. It should be a dash, not an underscore. Okay. We've got our fetch happening, but we haven't created that endpoint yet. So we're going to come over here. We are going to server.put to our messages, But remember, our messages is taking in an index in our route parameter. And so we are going to res, and we are going to go to our messages array. And what message do we want to edit? We want to edit the rec.params.index, because we are pulling the index out from our route parameters coming in via our params that is in the request coming in. And what do we want to edit in that message? We want to edit the text. And what do we want to set the text to? We want to set the text to the rec.body.text. Well, where is that text coming from? Through the body of our request, and our request is sending the body of the text of the change text. Where is the change text coming from? That's coming from the prompt that we are going to show them of what we want to set the text to. So after we make all of these changes, we want to tell the server, hey, send back the messages in the response of the request. So we're sending back our messages. Now we need to tell our fetch request to then get the response and return the response as JSON. And when you have done that, then get the data and set our messages to the data.messages. Okay. And it's going to tell me set messages is not defined. Well, crap. Set messages, we need the ability to update our state, but we don't have access to set messages. And if we go up here, we look at our messages list, and our messages list doesn't have access to set messages. So we need to go all the way back to our app. We need to look at our messages list component, and we need to give it access to a prop called set messages that has access to the set messages that is coming from our state. So it comes out of our use state. It goes into a prop called set messages. We then go to our messages list component and give it access to the set messages prop. And then our set messages prop also needs to go into our sent message component. And in our sent messages component, we then come down and we have access to the props. So we then need to say props.setMessages. Gonna save and come over here. Gonna refresh. I can come over here and now click on edit. Edit is going to say, what would you like this message to say? You're going to say ABC, hit OK. And it not only changes to ABC, but we can actually go to our network console or our network tab in the console, open up our messages, and in the headers, see that on one of these requests, on our HTTP messages and index 0, because that was the first index in the array, we did a put request. And in the put request, we used a request payload, right? What's going up the body, and we set the text to ABC. And so it updated on the server code. It ran, it used our index that we sent up. It used the text to set in the new body and sent down all the messages again. And so then we come over here. We are going to look in our response, and our response has all of our messages. And if you go to the preview tab, it will actually do what my Chrome extension also does, is just makes it easier to read. So we can pop open messages and we can see that my text is now ABC. Know that is a lot. I think it would be better to stop now and open it up for any questions. The homework will also have the requirement of getting a delete button working as well. But I am going to post all the server code in Slack in the right channel. I am then going to also post my messages list into Slack. And that should have all the fetches in there. And then I am going to stop there. I will do the delete request as well and have that example in the GitHub code, but I would encourage you to try that on your own. It's going to be very similar to the edit, and that it needs access to the index to know what it is going to delete. And it is going to use a different method, just like we used put to do the edit. Gonna stop now, and if anyone has questions or would like to screen share, you are welcome to do so. Stop sharing my screen. All the code is in Slack if you need it. And my live share link, if you were able to get the live share link working, that should have all my updated code in it as well. Also, if there is a part of the code that you would like explained again, or if there is something where you don't understand the flow of it, or you don't get how it's getting from the front end to the back end or the back end back to the front end, feel free to chime in and ask any questions about that.
Hey, Max.
No,
My
just kidding. Go ahead.
figures, story of my life. So my actual, like, for example, the success button for send, all of my stuff does not show up the same. Yours is, and I don't know. I went through the GitHub. I can't find a CSS error. I can't find a different code error. What are my other options?
Go ahead and share your screen and we will figure out what your other options are.
Oh, well, I'm on different computers, so that has made it difficult. But
So,
yeah, I can wait. I was just curious, like I can type and my messages will come up, but it's a lot like we did when we did the JavaScript. They're all on the left-hand side.
oh, so you're saying the received and the sent messages don't look any different.
Right. And I mean, the color is different and I went through the CSS, but it's those. And like, for example, the success button, my code says it's marked as success. Nope. It's all formatted incorrectly.
Is your Bootstrap working? Did you get the bootstrap.css file in your index.html as a link tag in the header? In the head, excuse me.
Nope, that would be it. Thank you.
No problem. Got something in my eye. I'm gonna go wash it out. I will be right back. I am back if anyone has questions. Code has been updated in the classroom repo. The weekend assignment has been created. Feel free to use the front end that we created like on Wednesday to turn that in on Thursday's assignment. It's not like you need to start from scratch to do the homework assignment. Feel free to use code that we've been working on. And if you would prefer to fill out the weekly feedback form, I think that has a couple more questions on it. So if you are up for filling that out, you can fill that out instead of the 30-second form. But filling out one or the other is better than filling out none. That's appreciated. And because you're stuck with me for another 4 weeks, so if you've got something that you'd like me to improve on, now is the time to mention it.
Max, I had a quick question about you updated right now the message list and the server in the student pasted code, but was there something else, another thing that was edited for the edit button we just added? Because it somehow I broke mine. Was there anything in the message input or app?
Yeah, in the message input, we added the on click to the messages list. But we shouldn't have changed anything in app. If you want to go to the GitHub Classroom repo,
Okay.
which I have a link to in the classroom assignment, that has all the finished code. And
Okay,
that may
thank you.
be the easiest place to pull things from.
Thank you.
Karen, thank you for that reminder. Office hours are tomorrow at 6:30 p.m. and it will be in this Zoom room link. And they will be both recorded and live streamed to YouTube. So if you cannot make it, you're welcome to join the recording. And if you cannot make it but have questions or would like me to cover something, including something that I said I would cover at office hours and then promptly forgot to cover, feel free to shoot me a message and I will write it down on a list to answer during that session. Believe it or not, it is 8:30. I have crammed as much information as I set out to cram into your heads. You've survived week 1 of the server. And I think it's important to recognize you have built a full stack app. Technically, you need the database for a full stack web application, but you are working in the stack. You are sending data from the front end to the back end, that data is stored in the back end and is getting sent back out to your front end. Your front end is reacting to that using state and rendering it out. So I think it's important to take that as a win. I sent an interesting message out to the instructors last night where I said, you know, I keep on doing these polls of figuring out, should we move forward? But the polls really tell me two things. That one tells me if you guys want more time to work on it, but two gives me an idea of how many people are coding along and how many people, you know, just want to keep rolling and then they'll catch up after class. And it is split right down the middle. And so we're trying to figure out, you know, like, I know some of you guys may think this is too fast, but, you know, is it purposely fast? Am I going too fast? Is this the pace that I want to be setting? And, you know, I looked at it as, well, there are these concepts that we've got to cover and we've, you know, just expose you to, even if you don't have true mastery of it. And so we know it's fast. We know it feels like the fire hose, but right now, if you were, you know, just getting a little water in your mouth from the fire hose, that is better than slowing it down to a trickle and not being able to expose you to certain things. So it is a boot camp. We know it is fast. That being said, if you feel like you are, you know, completely behind on this stuff, then that is the general consensus. I will find a way to recover this material. But we will be using the next 2 weeks to really focus on the database, learn about data modeling. It will be refreshing because there are no pre-requirements next week. We are totally in the database. It is a totally new thing. I don't think we will be writing a single line of JavaScript or HTML. Next week, it is a completely change of pace. We get to dive into SQL. We get to get into the database. Fun stuff there. The following week after that, we start bringing Node back into the party a little bit and start talking about how we can use the database in our code and how we can start, you know, using these concepts in the real world. And then the following 2 weeks, we have to practice just on full stack apps. We get to practice bringing in our database concepts and just iterating over and over, starting a new React project from scratch, starting a new Node project from scratch, starting a database from scratch, designing the database model, getting data in, making sure it's flowing from our front end to our back end, to our database, from our database back to the back end, back to the front end. And so while this feels like a fire hose, hopefully next week will be a refresher. And then the following 3 weeks are just practice, practice, practice. And it is really about hammering home that full stack developer title. And so even if you come out of this program and go, I don't want to be a full stack developer, or I'm more comfortable in the front end, you are getting experience in all 3 categories of front end, back end, and database to you know, have that practice. Mel, it's a kind of a hard question to answer of whether or not this is a typical pace at work. It depends on the title. It depends if the expectations at work are properly set up for a junior or an entry-level web developer. This would be, I would consider this a little fast, but not super fast if you were coming into a team at an entry-level position. With that said, this is actually slow for me. I actually go a little faster at work. You know, I could add 30 to 40 endpoints a day in my code. I'm building out 2 or 3 pages at a time. I'm layering in state functionality. This is a little slower for me, but it's also not like I'm going 10 times faster at work. So, you know, there is a sweet spot in there. There is also the notion of when you make it to a senior developer title, part of a senior developer is being able to help junior developers. And it's not just teaching them and going over new concepts. It's also pair programming with them for something that they may be able to accomplish on their own, but you want to show them a couple tips and tricks along the way. Yeah, I've been professionally coding for 10 years. So that is a long journey. And most people can't make it to a senior developer title without being a junior developer for at least a couple of years and having another senior developer to learn from. And so those are all very important questions to ask in the hiring process. Your hiring process is as much you applying for the job and hoping to get it as it is for the employer convincing you that would be a good place to work. And so when we go through the hiring process, we try, when I'm hiring someone, I try and get nerves out of the way. I try and make it about a conversation, but it is also a sales pitch for me to tell you why this job I think would be fun, what you would learn in the role, what your day-to-day looks like, all of that kind of stuff. And so those are good questions to ask of, it's fine to be completely honest and say, look, I'm a junior developer. I just graduated from a boot camp. What does your learning structure look like? What would expectations be? What kind of timelines or turnarounds would you have on projects or assignments given to me? Do you have a pair programming set up? Or do you have the notion of, 30 minutes that I can grab with a supervisor or a senior developer and be able to talk through my code? I think the most important question to ask is, what does my day-to-day look like? If I get in at 8 or 9 in the morning, what am I going to be doing between 8 o'clock and 5 o'clock? Like, tell me what your typical day is and tell me what a typical day looks like for this job description or this job title. So those are all great questions. Anything else you would like me to ramble on about before I let you guys go? All right, homework is posted in Google Classroom. If you would like, you can skip homework assignment 50 altogether and only upload in 51 because the front end that we're using in assignment 50 is the same front end we're using in 51. So if you turn in 51, I will go back and mark 50 as complete, even if you haven't turned it in. But anyway, I will see you guys tomorrow at 6:30 for office hours, which are optional. But I will hopefully see you there. Have a great night, guys. See ya.